Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I welcome you all to the Department for Educational 24th Educational Grand Round. I'm Dr. Amber Sultan, and I am the director and the moderator of this Educational Grand Round. Today's title for presentation is Online Teaching Tools and its Considerations. And the format of today's session is half an hour presentation by Ms. Azra Naseem, followed by panel discussion and question answer session. We have invited this blended and learning and e-learning. So they have expertise in this area. Some of the participants, they have joined online, and we have some participants from different countries like Canada, Egypt, Iraq, Kenya, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Malaysia, and of course, Pakistan. So we have participants from Pakistan as well. Okay, so over to you, Ms. Azra. Just wanted to add one thing. If you have any query, if you have any question, please feel free to share your questions through our Google form. And the link for the Google form has already been shared in the chat box. Thank you.
Good morning and assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's very nice to be here back with my friends and colleagues in the Department for Educational Development. I hope all of you are doing well and looking forward to our conversation on online teaching tools and considerations. I am representing the Network of Quality Teaching and Learning and the Institute for Educational Development at the Al Khan University. Okay, so in the next, whatever, I think we have 30 minutes, but now 28 minutes. In the next 28 minutes, I'll try to cover these three things, and then would love to have more conversation and, questions during the panel discussion. So we'll talk about the role of technology, I'll share some of my thinking around key considerations for designing online lessons and activities, and we'll also look at some tools and strategies for technology-enhanced teaching and learning. However, before I get into my thinking, I'd like to so in one word, describe the role of technology in your teaching. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is go to kahoot.it. All right, kahoot.it, and let's do this. Let's see the pin. So the pin is 7906488. Seven nine zero six four eight eight. All right, so we've got a few participants who are there. I love the pseudonyms. They're just so much fun, when people use, so cutie, we have got, very nice. We've got a Batman also. Lovely. All right. So we've got, I think, quite a few people just, so let me start. And it's a very simple question. What is your one word? Just using one word, what do you think is the role of technology in your teaching and learning? Okay. And it's just one word, so you can type the word. What's that one word you will use? Okay, so, lovely. So we're getting all the answers. Okay, we've got 33 responses. And so we need a few more responses because I think, yep, good, good, good. Got 24 seconds. Are you all I want to see what are the words everyone is using to describe the role of technology in your teaching. Okay. All right, we're almost at the end, and there you go. Okay, so let's see. Oops. So the words used are, we've got, so there's feasible, helping tool, two words. So helpful, maybe, facilitatory, important, essential, innovation, flexibility, engagement, connection. So quite a lot of very interesting words. We're talking about technology. Right? Connection, flexibility, advanced, time management, this Padlet. There's a ring also. Wow. What does that mean? This disruptive. Okay, so we've got some very interesting responses for the role technology has in your teaching. So that's great. Now, since I didn't get a chance to give my responses, some more friends are coming in. So lovely to see friends in the audience. So since I did not get a chance to write my one word, let me share my word. And I think someone else also shares this word. My word for technology, role of technology in teaching and learning is disrupt. And the reason why I use this term disruptive is is very much grounded in the literature as well. So way back 1997, even before internet and everything became very popular, um, the concept of disruptive technology was defined as a technology which was not designed for educational purposes, but has been adopted and embraced by educators as well as students because it makes sense to us, because we find it useful, right? But because it was not designed for educational purposes, the technology brought with it some other dimensions which were not kind of, directly related to education, but we had to adapt, adopt, we had to do all kinds of things to technology. For example, Google search. It was not designed for educational purposes, but many of us use Wikipedia, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. All of these tools are being used in education today, but none of them were designed for educational purpose. Okay, what it means is that when you have such tools in, and when we embrace such tools, they bring in some disruption. Okay, and disruption is not necessarily a bad thing all the time. And the fact that we in higher education have adopted these technologies and we're okay with this disruption is perhaps we were all ready for change in higher education, which the technologies are bringing in. So for me, the word is technology is disruptive in a good way. And I'd love to have more conversation with you. So this is another example of how technology is disruptive from lecture halls. It's a completely new way of teaching and learning. And so the teaching learning process is disrupted. Okay, so from lecture halls, we're moving into more mobile learning where students, sitting in the courtyard or wherever they are in the world, they're using their apps and they're learning. And there are all these Kahoots and Edpuzzle and all those tools that we're using, which was not the case in the past. And teacher was always the expert but teachers are not no longer the expert. We can just Google it, right? And I'm sure if you've walked around in the courtyard or wherever had a conversation, I'm sure you've heard students say, "Oh yeah, let's just Google it," right? So there is already disruption that we have seen. And then there was COVID, which is another big disruptor of everything in our lives and everything. And so it again disrupted. Technology came in so many different ways. And I think a question that I've been thinking about, and I would also encourage you to think about, is how has technology disrupted your teaching and learning since 2020, which is the beginning of COVID, lockdowns, and all sorts of things? I think it's a good question for us to think about. What are how has technology disrupted? Now the question. Now I want to come towards some of the considerations, and this is my thinking. So now technology selection of technology can happen at multiple levels. So there can be sort of like a countrywide. There is institutional, but I'm going to talk about considerations for technology selection or adoption at the teacher's level for lessons, for our teaching, for activities. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that. And some of the things I think to consider are, I think they're very familiar, right? All of you are very familiar with learning outcomes. It's a big consideration for technology selection, adoption in your teaching, in your lesson plan, in your activities. Your teaching strategy and your approach. Competencies is another. There are a whole lot of things around technology and the cost. So let's quickly look at all of these very quickly. Okay, I need to clear my, can I just disable annotations? Is that okay? Wait, how do I clear? Yeah. And if it's okay, so I've just disabled annotations for a bit. So Bloom's taxonomy, are we all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Yes, yes, I know. And so Bloom's taxonomy is helpful not only in writing our learning outcomes, but it's actually also very helpful in deciding which technology or which tool to use. So for example, and this is a new shape, right? Normally it's a pyramid, but it's a new shape and I like it because it talks about what's important. So the important bits are evaluation, analysis, application in our teaching. And so you can see the bulge. So if the learning outcomes require students to do more evaluative work, creating something, then there are specific technologies that you can select, right? So learning outcomes play a very important role in the selection of technology. Another thing to think about is your teaching strategy. How in your lesson, whatever the lesson you have planned or in your course, what are the different strategies that you have adopted or you want to adopt? Now, this is actually a framework that I find very helpful. It's called conversational framework by Diana Laurillard. And it's nothing new, it's old. And the framework basically talks about teaching and learning in higher education. And what Diana Laurillard has done has identified 6 different types of activities that higher education teachers or professors use to teach, right? So for example, students learn through acquisition, that is through reading, watching a video or listening to a lecture or a podcast, right? So this is one big activity that takes place in higher ed. There is also the role of discussions. Now, discussions can be large group discussions, small group, online discussions. Inquiry is another type of activity or teaching strategy that is used very commonly in higher education. Students also learn through practice, hands-on, and particularly in medicine and nursing, there's a very important role of hands-on practice. in students' learning. Collaboration is another. We no longer expect students to work independently, but we get them to work in groups and so on. And there's all production. We expect students to produce something, there's an assignment or a video or a presentation or something that they show to produce. So different teaching strategies, and I really enjoyed like this framework. It simplifies a lot of things for me, and then I can also kind of pick technologies according to the type of teaching strategy that I'm using. Then we have modalities, right? Different modalities. Is it online? Is it asynchronous? Is it synchronous? Or is it a combination? And combination of asynchronous and synchronous. There's a very interesting new term, bichronius. I know initially it was very hard for me to pronounce, but bichronius is a combination of both your synchronous and asynchronous online learning. And what we found during COVID pandemic 2020, when we did a survey, we found that AKU students prefer the bichronius online learning. So a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. There's blended learning, which is really a combination of online and face-to-face teaching, but it's a thoughtful combination of bringing together the best aspects of pedagogy, of face-to-face teaching and online teaching. We're also hearing a term called high flex teaching. It's become very popular during COVID pandemic, especially now that students have come back on the campus. But there's also a feeling that some are back, some are not back, and so on. So we're constantly grappling with a situation where some students are online, some are face to face. So that's your high flex teaching, right? And high flex is really it's a very interesting methodology where the same session or a same class is taught in 3 different ways. So students are in person right now, just as we have. Students are online, and we have about 69 students online. But there's a third modality that students can also complete this topic, whatever the topic is being taught, asynchronously. So those who can't be online or in person can also. Now it sounds very interesting, but it's very challenging to manage and to design and so on. You do need classrooms with the right kind of technology. And so there's a lot of, so it's still in the early phases, but what we're seeing globally is that in future, there will be more high flex teaching, which will become more common. Then we talk about competencies. It's very important for us to think about the competencies. And this is a framework, I'm sure many of you have seen this framework. It's called TPAC, Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge. And what it does is it highlights the importance of all the areas of knowledge that we as teachers need to have. So we need to know our content, but we also need to have technological skills and pedagogical skills. So having the competencies at the teacher's end, but also think about the competencies of your students. Where are they in terms of their digital literacy, and do they need any prep work, and so on and so forth. Finally, technology and cost, and I've combined the two because cost is often associated very closely with technology acquisition, and number of things to think about. Access is a big one. When selecting a tool, what sort of access do you have, or do the students have? Is it easy to use? Do think about hardware, software, connectivity, but also think about if you're using a tool, if it's an online tool, what are the data protection policies? Who owns the data? So for example, if it's a cloud-based application, so who owns that data? Does the company own that data, or do you still have rights on the data and whatever? What kind of licensing agreements you have? Is it a one-time perpetual license? Is it something that you have to constantly renew, and so on? So a number of things to think about. And usually, I think these kinds of conversations take place at the department level. And so somebody in the department has already done this research, this kind of background work before, we incorporated in our lessons. And now I have about 10 minutes. So I'm going to talk about tools for teaching with technology, right? So this was the third thing on my agenda today. So there are a number of tools. And I think you might be familiar with many of these tools, but I just want to go through them. So TED-Ed, a tool for acquisition type of activities, right? So your videos, there is Google Scholar where, you can access reading. So again, acquisition, more understanding from Bloom's level and so on. There are also 2 podcast websites, and you might be familiar with these websites. So K-Lime is interesting because they have a very regular podcasts on medical education. And the Curbsiders is for internal medicine. They have also very regular podcasts. And podcasts are interesting because these are, students and also us, we can acquire knowledge when we're in the car, or when we're sitting and waiting for an appointment or whatever. So that's another benefit of having podcasts. So here again, a few more tools, things like Canva. How many of you use Canva? Yeah, so excellent. So a lot of people are familiar with it. So Canva is another one of my favorite tools, because in Canva, you can create a lot of teaching material. For example, if you want to create, let's say, how we used to have handouts and other things. So you can actually create some very interesting infographics, sort of like handouts in Canva. And you can also have collaborations, so students can also use it. There is also 2 animation tools which I've used and I found them very helpful. Powtoons is something that is good and Movely. Why have I put Powtoons and Movely there for animation? Because I came across an article recently where a survey was done in North America, not here. And what they found was that students found animated professor more trustworthy than the real professor in the video. And that was a very interesting thing. And I still don't know what that means, right? Moving forward, and I don't know what the students' responses will be in our context. But it's something for us to think about. What's happening in the students' mind, especially the younger ones. So it's always good to kind of have a sense of, all right, so there's Powtoon, there's Movely, there are tools available. And Diego is a social bookmarking tool, which is also very interesting. You can create a class bookmarking site. So whatever, let's say if you teach anatomy or physiology or whatever, or bioethics, whatever your course is, and you can create a class bookmarking site where all the good websites that you have reviewed and you think are important, you can include them and students can access, students can add more to it. So it's a really interesting tool. On this slide, I've put some more tools, and I think Padlet, I think 100%, everybody knows Padlet, yes. But there are also tools like Mind Map and Coggle, which are very interesting tools for mind mapping and basically brainstorming. Google Jamboard and Mural are also tools that you can use for brainstorming. And Google Docs is again very common. So these tools can really help in, especially when students are having their group discussions and thinking about, in their inquiry projects. So these tools can be used. And discussions, we love discussions. We love face-to-face discussions. We have online discussions on our virtual learning environments. There's, written discussions. But there are also tools where we can have video or audio-based discussions, such as Flipgrid. There is VoiceThread and Parley Ideas. all three tools allow us to have audio discussions in a threaded format. And I was part of a research study with some colleagues in the medical college, and the bioethics faculty. And in that project, we found that, so there was a discussion board and students had to write their responses, text-based responses. Um, what we found was that there were some students and some participants who said, we would have loved to have an audio option. And we looked at the literature also, and what we have found is that in many instances, students, particularly in second language contexts, they prefer to have an audio based option so that they can express themselves, they can respond to a discussion orally rather than in a written format. And so therefore it's I feel that it's good to have options available. It's good to know what's out there. Okay, and quizzes. Students, now this is another thing that students like, which is self-assessment quizzes. They've given us feedback a number of times that self-assessment quizzes are very important for them because it helps them understand, figure out how much they have understood about the topic. So things like Ed Puzzle, quizzes, and we have a quizzes expert sitting over there, and she's going to be on the panel also. Kahoot, we've used Kahoot, but I'm sure you've all used Kahoot and you're familiar with it. So these are, again, some more tools. So as you can see, there's a whole range of tools, and I've shared just a few, but there's just tons of tools out there, and every other week you'll see a new tool, right? And I think, and so my strategy is, again, I use the considerations, the wheel that I'd shared. I keep those things in mind when I'm selecting a tool, but also I really think that it's so important to map the learning outcomes, the task, and the tool. So if there is a tool that if I found which is very relevant to my learning outcome and my tool, even if it's an old tool like Padlet, I'll stick to Padlet instead of jumping to a new tool right away. So and so this is something that we can think about, creating a simple table to map the learning outcomes, the activity, and the tool can help. And finally, as we're drawing, I'm good with time. So good. So this is something you can scan it. If you don't know about this manual, this is a manual that we have developed based on the work that we've done at Aga Khan University. It has lots of examples from Aga Khan University, how we design online and blended courses, and you'll be able to see the names of all the faculty who have contributed to the development of this manual. It is a very simple step-by-step manual. Anyone who's looking for ideas of how to start, where to go, and so on, so you can use it. It's under Creative Commons. Um, I hope you've scanned it so you know where to go. And finally, before I end, I came across, how we come across, oh, these trends will change the world, right? So I came across this and I found it very interesting that there are 8 essential technologies for the future. And the question that I'm asking, and I will pose to you before we get into a panel discussion, is how do you think these technologies will change medical education in Pakistan, such as augmented reality or blockchain, virtual reality, drones, 3D printing? Yep, I'm almost done. Okay, so something for us to think about. And I think I'm going to end because time's up. Thank you very much for listening. And
Okay, thank you, Ms. Azra, for the wonderful presentation, wonderful and thoughtful presentation. So I just wanted to add a few things about Ms. Azra's theme. She's the director of Blended and Digital Learning in the Network of Quality Teaching and Learning and a faculty member, Institute for Educational Development at Al Khan University. She was trained as an e-learning designer at the University of Technology, Sydney, Australia, and completed a fellowship with the ICT4D Collective at Royal Holloway University College, London. And she is also a recipient of the Al Khan University's Innovation Impact Award of Distinction in 2022. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Now we move on to the panel discussion and the question answer session. For the panel discussion, we have invited few experts in the blended learning and e-learning. Our first panelist is Ms. Khairul Ajani. She is currently working as an assistant professor and assistant dean teaching learning undergraduate programs at Al Khan University School of Nursing and Midwifery. She is the first PhD in health sciences nursing from the Faculty of Health Sciences, AKU. She provides support and monitoring for the delivery of academic programs at undergraduate level at the School of Nursing. I would like to invite you, Ms. Dr. Khairul Sajani. Our second panelist is Dr. Masood Javed. Dr. Masood, by profession, he's a general surgeon and medical educationist and currently working as Director Medical Affairs and Learning Innovations at Farm Evo. He's also working as Director, Institute of Leadership Excellence and Associate Editor of Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences. He started 6-week e-learning research module for undergraduate students of the Dow University of Health Sciences, and he also developed blended curriculum in surgical clinical education. He developed numerous online courses about Certificate of Medical Editing in Journalism, Certificate of Online and Distance Education, online course development tools, Certificate in Health Professional Education. So please, and our third panelist is Dr. Sadia Masood. Dr. Sadia, she is working as section head dermatology and director residency program at AKU Department of Medicine. She did her master's in health professions education from Al Khan University. She was selected as an international FAMER fellow program from Philadelphia. She did postgraduate certification in assessment and accreditation from Keele University, US. She got prestigious higher education academy fellowship. Her main area of interest is blended learning, technology-led teaching, and innovation in teaching. So I would like to invite Dr. Sadia Masood. So we will take questions from the participants who have joined online. Yes, I would also like to invite Ms. Azra to please come on the stage. We have panelists, we have participants online and as well as who have joined physically. So we will take questions from both the participants. So the session is open for discussion. Any question from the participants who have joined physically? Yes, Dr. Foster.
Your slides were really amazing. Very nice talk. I just want to comment on the word disruption. And I really felt it's my age, which made me feel as if, virtual technology has disrupted my teaching and learning. But hearing it from you, it makes my day that no other people also say it. And it's really, I don't think it's just disrupted, but it's sort of, chaos. Out of chaos, something nice comes out. And this is really something very, very, um, I think I appreciate it. Where something very nice has come out of it, because we can modify our teaching and learning strategies much more. We've got a wider platform now. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
The other thing, Dr. Costa, thank you first of all for appreciating the presentation. But I think I also want to add here is that the technologies, the disruptive technologies like Google search or Twitter and Facebook and all, So Google search started was launched in 1998. Everything else is was born in 2000. These are very young technologies, right? And in education, their time period has been very like small. So these are not mature technologies or practices. We are still in that early stage, like the teenage of exploring and making mistakes and stuff. So I also feel that with disruption, there's also an opportunity for us to be open to experimentation, to trying out, what works, what doesn't work, and how. I think it will take some time for us to come up with like a solid body of work to say, okay, this works and this doesn't. We're still so I think there will be chaos, there will be more disruption for a few more years.
So any other comment from the panelist? Yes, Dr. Khairul.
So since we're talking about disruption, you said at your age and it doesn't match. So I thought of my undergrad students who are high school leavers, and we all know, we have kids at home, that they are glued to their screen the whole time. We have to disrupt their connection. But when it came to learning online, there was disruption there as well. So we were the first ones to be trained, amongst the first ones to be trained by the Faculty Development Program for blended learning in 2012, right? And when COVID struck, those skills came in very handy, and we were all geared up to teach online and assess online, and we downloaded those through remote teaching, because our students were in the mountainous areas of Pakistan, no internet, no bijli. So we had to come down to remote teaching, downloading packs and couriering them USBs in their center of school, so they could drive, they could walk, they could pick it up, do their things at home. We had to work with the leadership to open Khan education schools in Gilgit, Chitral, and Hunza, so the students could walk to that center, access the limited internet they had, work and come back. But even if they, one side, want to be glued to the screen, but because they did not come back from a background which enabled them to learn online so rapidly. So, there was a time when my students used to come and say, कि खुदा का वास्ता बंद कर दें, face to face पढ़ा लें, मुसीबत हो गई जान की, how are we going to, we didn't have that connection because we weren't mentally, physically prepared with the resources. But as time goes now, I see them enjoying this because we've learned better, their exposure has strengthened, we have learned how to provide good resources. COVID has behaved itself a little better. So they're back to the campus. I see them in the courtyard, logged into the VLE, logged into their lectures, enjoying the tea. So they are getting the feel of the university students. So these are high school leavers going through the disruption, not coming out, like shining diamonds out of the rough, but that is enabling them to go for higher education. They may be able to do masters from abroad or PhD from abroad because this experience has been enriching for them.
Any other comment?
So, very rightly pointed out. So, I have the same opinion because when the COVID hit, so we don't know anything about technology because most of the thing, because I was doing something from US, so I know Zoom and everything, but yahan pe there is no concept about online teaching and everything. And when the COVID, I think to some extent it is a blessing for technology driven teaching because that taught us about how to stick to the screen and how we can engage the students. Like I can refer to Azra ke inhone bahut, they did lot of boot camps to teach us about how we can engage our students. So I enjoy all these sessions and then I try to reflect back on my students. So I think these are different strategies. Initially, we face lot of problems. Even our teachers feel unready. They don't want we are not happy. How we can teach the student? वो हमारे सामने नहीं है. We don't see what is their response. But gradually, with the passage of time, aista, the things got better. So now we are thinking about uh, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. So before, I think 2 or 3 years back, we even never thought about all these things. So I think with the passage of time and when the COVID hit, we learn a lot in technology.
Thanks a lot. First of all, thanks a lot for the wonderful presentations and the preamble that what are the way forward and what are the tools which we need to use. As you have used the word disruption, so online education and e-learning, we use the word, I can use the two words, liberty of your using, disruptive innovation. That means you are redundant, what you are doing before, you make yourself become redundant and coming over. So online education is something like this. And Alvin Toffler has said that you need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. We all used to teach as a faculty member in face-to-face setting. We are not trained in online environment. And some have their interest, but majority by default because of the COVID or other reasons we forced to do it. Majority of the time, what we are doing in face-to-face, we try to do in online environment and stop doing that thing, which doesn't work in that way because online educational theoretical framework and all other aspects are different. We need to develop different educational experiences for the student, as you said about virtual reality and other tools and different tools. And majority of us, because we are not trained and it's difficult for us to engage our students as well. So that we need to work forward, and we need to see today's generation of now, it's beyond Generation Z as well, as a prosumers. We can only engage them, but not only behaving that they are consumer of our educational content, but they can produce and learn more. The reason is that why Facebook is more important now in the area, why Instagram, why? Because they have the content is not by them, but by the user. So we need to use those technological aspect in our teaching and learning and using those kind of tools as well. So my just one of the take away, another aspect for all of us, there are multiple tools which we have discussed and they're all wonderful. Of course, at we need to select few of them and institutionalize them. Majority of them, because I go around at different universities around the country, I see them using them in experimental way by in workshops or one or two faculty members. But in a formal curriculum, in integrating that so that outcome will be achieved much more is a missing part, which I think we need to work for those things so that our outcome based education is much more and we work around those things. So these are few points, and as there are questions we can work around for those things. And one of the question, because it was pointed out with the cost and technology at different educational institutions in Pakistan, we have, that's an issue. IT support, technological expert, those are the instructional designers or the content developers and the subject matter experts. They are not in one aligned, they are not in the alignment. So that is the reason that maybe you have one thing is much more wonderful at your institution, but the other is not aligned. So at the end, the outcome what you want to achieve in the proper way is not achievable. So that is maybe not at one institution, but that is at the other way around. So thanks a lot again for the wonderful talk. And if there
Thank you. Gee, we have one more question from the participants. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Shaur, working in Jinasin Medical University. And after doing certificate course of Dr. Masood, I was very much interested and involved in e-learning tools, and I'm continuously and practicing using all these tools. And I'm also having an online education course for masters in health profession education. I'm running it. What I want to ask that what is the effect of these tools we are using tools for undergrad students. They're already using so much internet, so much use of screens there. So if we'll also start motivating them to do the same thing, we start we will become bike runners and use high flex technology, high flex teaching. Then what happened to the mental health and the physical health of the students?
I think so. I can begin, but I know Dr. Khairunisa has done some work around students' mental health and stuff. But so I think again a great question. Um, and as I'd mentioned, in response to Dr. Koster's comment that these technologies are very young and they're very new, and so we're still in that phase of experimentation to figure out. And so there's a concept of digital literacy, right? But we are no longer talking about digital literacy, but we're actually now talking about digital fluency, right? And so what is digital fluency is basically that kind of discernment to decide when to use technology and when not to use technology, right? And so, for example, for faculty member, a big question, and as I said, have some considerations of when technology is most useful for your teaching, for your students. And if you feel that in your course, it might actually disrupt their mental health, their peace, or whatever, then perhaps that's not the best time to use technology. So I think, again, uh, there's a lot of room and space for us, the faculty, to try new things, of course, in an ethical framework and stuff, and understand and think about what works. Because again, with technology, it's very, very context specific. We can't say that this is X, Y, and Z will work in every context. It's not. And Dr. Rehana will remember from last year, we did some work together, and everybody has a different understanding of what will work for their context, their course, and stuff. So I think that's what I would say. Mental health is very important, and as teachers, again, we have to move towards more digital fluency to be able to make those decisions. Perhaps technology is not the best option for my students at this point.
Yeah, I think I'll just add on that the key is striking the balance, I would say. There is no denying that screen is the tomorrow, digital, internet, innovation. Uska good bhi hai, bad bhi hai, but this is what it is. But how do we plan the journey? How do we have the outcome in mind, and we go backwards to design how this learning journey is going to give the student the experience, the resources, the tool, the breaks as well to balance their life. Because starting from home also, I mean, when I'm screaming at my kids ke bas kar do phone ko, and they're saying, okay, tell me kya karu, right? Kya karu, tell me. And I really don't have an answer. I really don't have an answer. Parks mein nahi jana, dengue hai. Zyada se zyada aap, you can go to Pizza Hut, KFC, you can only eat out or shop out. This is the context that we live in. It's too hot for them to play outside during the day. After Maghrib, you don't allow them because of the machar and security, and they do not have it. So we will have to create a journey for them where they can strike the balance, especially in healthcare. We then divide it into portions, that this one is asynchronous, which is the pre-reading, the self-assessment, the self-testing, and then creatively call them in the skills lab when we take them to the patient area. And then the wrap-up again is through VLE, so you're kind of connecting the dots together and then assessing in a way which meets all the required outcomes. So I would say we will gradually learn to strike the right balance.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I'm Dr. Kabar Raz. I'm assistant professor in DED and assistant dean in PGME. So I'm not sure what you meant when you raised this question about mental health. I also don't know what were the target that you were talking about, were the facilitators or the teachers or the learners themselves. But I think what we need to understand and embrace that any change, it's not just related to technology, any change requires time and patience, and it's got to exert some kind of stress that eventually you would matlab you can say कि अच्छा ये मैं कर सकता हूँ mental stress, or it's affecting your mental health. But this is something that we need to embrace. And as they said, okay, yes, so technology is the reality, and that's the way forward. And if we accept that, so and we accept all the challenges that are lying in front of us to embrace that change, there got to be some mental stress. I think that the way forward is that we are ready to embrace it. We are ready to embrace the change, and then we design a way forward in such a way that there are adequate learning opportunities for both the groups, for both the educators as well as that of the learners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we can take few questions from the participants who have joined online. The first question is, how can we effectively teach clinical skills through online platform? Clinical skills.
Okay, a very commonly asked questions from the clinical faculty when we say about online education, or of course, not everything can be taught online, simple answer. So don't expect that whatever is there, you can teach online. So there is nothing such like that. For example, examination skills and many aspects of professionalism. But of course, there are something which can be taught. For example, in clinical, we have virtual patients, and virtual patient is very appropriately, properly used for decision making. So decision making skills can be done in many professionalism kind of scenarios can be done on those things. Even in examination, we used and we found our student to very much helpful and engaging when we use interactive videos for using their clinical skills. So they have to click on the hotspots, where are the important aspect is, where they need to put their hands, what are the clinical findings they see during that examination point. So these are some of the tools which can be used. So, and we have developed, I remember the first virtual patients kind of thing, which I developed and I taken to Dr. Saida Kosa in a room and show that we have developed this is what we are developing at that point, and that's the first way, because it was when we are developing clinical educational curriculum for undergraduate at the third year for Dow University at that point. So these are some of the things can be done, and there may be more ideas from other members of clinical side. Yes.
Yes, Dr. Tariq.
So similarly, so I developed a virtual patient because when I thought, okay, blended learning, say we are going to teach them things, but how we can teach them the critical thinking. So for that, we develop virtual patient. So virtual patient is a very good idea that they will move forward a question को answer किया फिर, तो that would improve their critical learning skills. So the one thing, other thing, the OSCE and something like that we developed during COVID, वो हम कर सकते हैं, but 100% you can't do all the things virtually. So it would be mix of virtual and face to face. So thank you.
So thank you. I think this is a very, very relevant question about clinical teaching. I think in clinical teaching, if you start from history taking, then clinical examination, then approach towards the patient, then diagnosis of the patient with differential diagnosis and management plan, and then follow-up. I think so. These are the different steps which which are there in clinical teaching, and I think those are the things which day in and day out we teach our residents and medical students and all others. So what I feel that history, yes, you can learn online. History taking, how to take history, you can see different models, and you can teach how to take history. The second important part is examination. Clinical examinations ke liye, these virtual patient and other things are all there, but I think they cannot be 100% replacing the clinical examination, because patient feel and touch is one of the most important things. The thing, the problem ek aur aa gaya hai in clinical setting as well, that non-touch techniques se sari clinics chal rahi hain aajkal. Nobody touches patient, nobody sees patients. हाथ भी नहीं लगाते, आमने सामने बैठ के बात करके चले जाते हैं. That's a major deficiency which we are facing in actually real practice. किसी को जाके exam अगर करता हूँ तो ये लोगों से मैंने ये भी सुना है, after this is the time in last 3 years मैंने multiple किसी ने मुझे हाथ लगाया. So this is a wrong practice which is going on, and I think which is wrong. So but clinical examination, yes, you can learn online through virtual patient, virtual reality, and number of other things, but it cannot replace actual patient feel and touch. Approach towards the patient, again, clinical reasoning and approach towards the patient, yes, you can learn online. Differential diagnosis, yes, you can learn online. Management plan, yes, you can learn online. Evaluation, follow-up plans, I think all these things you can learn online. You can develop criterias, and you can develop protocols and different things you can learn. But I think that the second most important thing of clinical examination, वहां पर जो है ना वो बात नहीं बनती जो एक्चुअल होना चाहिए. Otherwise I think, I would say,
इसी बात से continuation में एक बात बहुत important, in clinical practice we are not able to give feedback to our students what is their decision, what is their diagnosis और चीजें. When we work on those things, even when there are few students and postgraduates, so these technological tools to help us to develop some educational experiences in which individualized feedback is received based on whatever they are doing as well. So that is the missing part is many of our thing, because when we do the clinical setting, time constraints, because you have to serve the hospital at that point. At the same time, you're involved with the teaching and learning, which you need to compromise sometimes. So that at very good aspect to be addressed in using the technology within the classroom.
Okay, we will take one more question. What strategies do we use to make our online teaching more inclusive for students from diverse socioeconomic background?
Okay, so again, a very good question. Whoever has asked, thank you for asking this question. There's a framework called Universal Design for Learning. And Universal Design for Learning is actually a very good framework for us to consider when we are incorporating technology, whether we're teaching online or whether we are just using technology within the class. And what this framework, it's called UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. What it talks about is um, whenever you're using technology or teaching, make sure that you provide multiple options, right? So don't have one size fits all strategy in your class, but have multiple options. So give students multiple ways to engage with your content, such as your reading or video, multiple ways in which they should be able to show their output. Now, it's hard to do that, especially in standardized curriculum where, assessment is in a certain way. So how do you bring that kind of diversity, right, to allow students to, um, you know, um, so there's exam, but then have alternate assessments as well, right? Offer alternates. So multiple ways of presenting information, not just one way of text, but give them option to understand information through audio and video and image. So I would say that have a look at the framework, Universal Design for Learning, and they have some great suggestions and strategies to make your teaching more inclusive.
Okay, any other comment? No. We will take one last question from the online participants. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits of online teaching, no doubt, but what are the most important concerns of online learning being identified?
uh, Many most important from the faculty aspect, we are not trained to develop such kind of things. Even if we just give you an example of lecture, in face-to-face, you used to give 45 to 1 hour lecture, but ideally in online, it should be very less, and ideal time is 5 to 10 minutes and a small chunking of information. Plus, as Powtoon was pointed out, students like when you develop such kind of contents with doodly and all of that, but of course, we don't have skills and times, many of us, to develop such kind of content. From the student point of view, engagement of them, because they go away from different points when you are with the devices and all other things. So there are many challenges, but to engage students, your learning content should be so much engaging that they sit there and enjoy that as compared to others. For example, using Instagram in your learning, is more engaging for a student maybe as compared to using something else, or Twitter hashtags, for example. Sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't. So there are many challenges, but we need to work around, and challenges depend upon students level, the course which you are teaching, the environment, and the coursework what are there. So there are different ways.
Okay, so just wanted to add one thing here, because we have been conducting many courses during this COVID area. And I think that the most important thing is how we can engage our participants. So we got very good feedback from our courses, because you know what, if it's student centered, the participant centered, and we engage our participants by using multiple technology, multiple tools for engaging students. So I think that's the way of to success. That's it. So any other comment from the participants? Any other comment from the panelists? Dr. Naveed.
Thank you. So Dr. Naveed, Chair, Department for Educational Development. I just wanted to thank Ms. Azra Naseem for the wonderful presentation. I'm sure many of us in the room in our teaching and learning course are students, and there were around 80 participants from across the world have benefited. I would also like to thank all the panelists, Dr. Masood Javed, uh, Dr. Sadia Masood, and Dr. Khairunisa Ajani for taking time out. And we have actually taken advantage of your experiences and expertise in the field. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to request Dr. Naveed Yusuf to please come on stage and give this bouquet to Ms. Azra Naseem. Thank you so much for all the participants to join online as well as physically. And thank you for all the panelists as well as the speaker for taking your time out. Thank you so much.